right? These are the folks who have just gone down the rabbit hole of increasingly unhinged conspiratorial insanity. This battle started from the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson wing of the broader right. So Tucker's definitely seems to have quite an obsession with the Jews. It does seem to me like he's out for something of a cynical power grab. There's a lot of people who have been listening to this un-American, un-Western, anti-Western civilizational tripe.
Tonight, MAGA Warfare. The movement that once reshaped American politics is now eating itself alive. Conservatives are publicly tearing chunks out of each other, and the fallout is getting ugly. Started with Tucker Carlson, once the voice of mainstream MAGA, sitting down for a friendly chat with open antisemite Nick Fuentes. Some argue this platform hateful, anti-Jewish views, and the right and America are entering dangerous territory. And now even the mighty Heritage Foundation, the rights of America's most powerful think tank, is in open revolt, with staff accusing its leadership of flirting with hate to chase clicks. And while the left watches on gleefully, the question for the right is brutal. Can MAGA survive this moment, or are we seeing the start of the 2028 presidential election playing out before us? Joining me in the studio tonight in Washington, D.C., Rebeka Zeljko, reporter for The Blaze. And joining me down the line is Conservative commentator Josh Hammer. Rebeka, I'll come to you in a moment, but good evening, Josh. This is looking pretty serious now. It's sort of well beyond people arguing on the internet, as they often do, and is actually having a major impact on the sort of once great bastions of the right.
Yeah, the battle is on, and I think it's important, Harry, to recognize where this battle started. This battle started from the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson wing of the broader right. These are the folks who have just gone down the rabbit hole of increasingly unhinged conspiratorial insanity over the past two and a half years, call it give or take, and they're just saying wildly unhinged things. And a lot of them are saying things that are positively, frankly, un-American and un-Western civilization. I mean, there's too many examples to count here, but Tucker Carlson on his show just a few months ago was talking about how Sharia law is actually not that bad. I mean, look at Abu Dhabi, the UAE, look at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Not my words, Tucker Carlson's own words. Well, once upon a time, I thought conservatives were pretty united that Sharia law is actually not good. Sharia law is not something that we should be doing here. But this is the guy who brought on the president of Iran for a puff interview, brought on the emir of Qatar for a puff interview there. I mean, whose side are we on here? I mean, once upon a time, conservatives understood that to be on the side of the Bible and Western civilization was what it meant to be a conservative, to pass down this tradition from one generation to the next. It seems to me that that is what we're debating. I feel pretty confident that I am on the right side of that debate, Harry. I'm not sure I could say the same of my interlocutors.
So Tucker Carlson's basically saying, look, if you don't like it, don't watch it. You know, if you don't want to see me interview Nick Fuentes, don't watch it. But it doesn't really cut the mustard, really, does it? When you're platforming a guy who's on the pretty much the, as you say, the fringe, the far, far, far fringe, even if he is of the right, I'm not entirely sure personally that he even is. Bringing him onto Tucker's mega platform, it doesn't really cut much mustard, does it? When you say, well, you can't ignore it because these clips are flying around the world everywhere now.
No, it's totally intellectually lazy to simply say, oh, if you don't like it, don't watch it, or I have a First Amendment right. I mean, no one's doubting the First Amendment here, first of all. No one is saying you don't have a First Amendment right to bring on whatever show you want to, absent government censorship. Rather, we are saying that you are making a disgraceful editorial judgment in choosing to give a massive platform to someone who literally has said that Hitler is cool, who has called the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, a race traitor for marrying his beautiful, wonderful wife, Usha, and having, by definition, mixed-race children. These are disgusting individuals. Nick Fuentes is a disgusting, loathsome individual, and he does not deserve to be anything other than shunned by people with massive platforms like Tucker Carlson. Why
do you think he's doing it? Why do you think that suddenly these people are being bought in from the cold and to be given this platform? Tucker, as I said, Tucker said he's just interested in what this guy has to say and he's asking questions. You say that doesn't hold intellectual water. In that case, then why are they doing this?
So Tucker's definitely seems to have quite an obsession with the Jews. There are any number of data points to indicate this. By now, he has had on the crackpot pseudo-historian Darryl Cooper for multiple interviews. This is the guy who says that Winston Churchill was actually the lead villain in World War II, and then actually the United States perhaps, maybe, just maybe, should have sided with Hitler over Stalin and given the Nazis a victory in World War II. He actually had on a second guest to present that exact same line of argumentation there. So he has a deep, deep obsession with the Jews, which is positively unhealthy. But it's ultimately not really about the Jews, Harry. What I see happening here is I see someone who ultimately is interested in trying to disintegrate the MAGA coalition. If you look at his Fuentes interview, he says that he hates no one more than Christian Zionists. Well, Christian Zionists, defined broadly as people who are, one, Christian, and two, generally supportive of U.S.'Israel relations, that's a very high percentage of the Republican voting base. That is probably a plurality of the voting base. If you detest them more than anyone else, which is what Tucker said, apparently more than Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Islamists of any stripe, transgender, activists, Antifa, whatever, he hates Christian Zionists the most. If that's your goal, then I think it's fair for us to conclude that what you're actually trying to do is to disintegrate MAGA and to try to build some sort of neo-pagan, anti-Western edifice in its place.
At the same time, Tucker Carlson, when we interviewed him about 10 days ago, he was, very keen to sort of keep his powder dry when his support for J.D. Vance, suggesting that he perhaps could be the future of the future candidate to replace Trump. If you want to have the Republicans controlling the White House for 4 more years after 2028, why would you be blowing up the successful movement that put Trump in the White House?
Well, I mean, some friend Tucker Carlson is to J.D. Vance. I mean, he literally had on his show for a puffball 2-hour-plus interview the guy who called J.D. Vance a fat race traitor, who's married to a word that I won't even say because it's a slur for Indian people. I mean, what kind of friend was Tucker Carlson to Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated 2 months ago, just under that? No one caused Charlie Kirk more personal hell over the years than Nick Fuentes. There's literally not a single individual who tormented Charlie Kirk and his grieving widow Erika more over the years than Nick Fuentes. So what kind of a personal friend, if nothing else, is Tucker Carlson? Look, I think he maybe thinks that he has someone in J.D. Vance who might be able to implement his dystopian agenda. The difference is that J.D. Vance is an adult in the room, and he has, again, I mean, if nothing else, he literally has an Indian wife there. The Nick Fuentes Groyper wing of the movement, I would say they're not even part of the movement, but those folks are not going to ultimately support someone like a J.D. Vance on those grounds alone, and Tucker Carlson probably should understand that, I would think.
Yeah, J.D. Vance coming out this week to urge, an end to the infighting amongst other things, but he's stopped short of criticising Tucker. He stopped short of saying, we shouldn't be platforming this hate. When he was confronted with the Groypers, these online sort of armies of, and there are a lot of them, Nick Fuentes supporters at a Turning Point rally the other week, he kind of ducked and dived, even though, as you say, he was asked some pretty grim questions about his wife's faith, his wife's ethnicity, his own faith, his own views on Israel. He does seem to be, stopping short of actually putting the boot in, as you and many others on the right have done so eloquently.
Look, Tucker, it's hard to say exactly what his motive is at this time there, but again, I'm kind of speculating here. It does seem to me like he's out for something of a cynical power grab. This is someone who feels editorially unrestrained following his ouster from Fox News 2.5 years ago. But all of his editorial choices combined for at least 2.5 years now leads me to believe this is someone who does not actually have the interests of the United States of America and Western civilization as his foremost area of interest right now. How else can you possibly explain, even holding aside the Jews, which again, he's positively obsessed with, something like 75 to 80% of his recent newsletters mention the word Jew or Israel. It is a disgusting obsession. But even holding that aside, how do you explain his decisions to do these propagandistic videos in the Moscow supermarket and subway while offering these very friendly interviews with the president of Iran on the one hand, while utterly grilling Senator Ted Cruz on the other hand? I mean, this is not the behavior of someone who is on our side, so to speak, of the American political divide, the American cultural divide. Frankly, it's not how someone behaves who's on the correct side of the civilization versus barbarism sweepstakes either.
If you don't mind, look, for our viewers and listeners around America, around Britain, around the wider West, I'm going to play you some of the things that Fuentes and his ilk have been saying. One, if you don't mind, including about you, when pretty grim stuff. Have a look at this.
Josh Hammer can say Tucker Carlson should be neutralized like an animal. And that's fine. No one's going to criticize that. That's not violent. That doesn't tend towards anything bad because he's a pro-Israel Jew. So there's no accountability.
What's your response to it? That's the oldest conspiracy theory in the book there, isn't it?
Yeah, look, this is about an op-ed that I wrote for the Daily Mail, the well-known British newspaper. This op-ed came out about a week ago. I was asked to write an op-ed responding to the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview. I gave my opinion, which is that this is disgraceful, that Tucker Carlson is enabling the horrific actors there. And in my concluding paragraph, I upon arguing that Tucker is ultimately trying to destroy the MAGA coalition, the argument that I've just laid out here, I said that the fox is in the hen house, and if the fox is not neutralized, then ultimately the entire Republican coalition could go down. That's a paraphrase, but it's a very close paraphrase.
Yeah, a metaphor.
Yeah, obviously what I meant is that the fox here means his policies, his influence, his general vision for what the American right should do there. And for what it's worth, 3 editors of the Daily Mail, a very well-known international newspaper, looked at this, and no one batted an eyelash for a second as to what I meant because it was so haltingly obvious. But then you had all these bad faith actors, Dave Smith, the so-called comedian, Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene got in on the act, obviously Fuentes, saying, oh my God, Josh Hammer is trying to call for the assassination of Tucker Carlson. No, no, no. I've actually been the victim of threats of political violence. I have spent countless hours on my own show, written countless columns on my weekly syndicated column, decrying it. Not really decrying it, but decrying it as the one thing that has potential to literally destroy this country. Because the day that comes that we cease to decide our differences and settle our differences at the ballot box and instead pick up knives and rifles, that is the day that this republic dies. It is abhorrent. I condemn it with every fiber of my being. But again, anyone who has more than 2 brain cells operating between the ears already knew that that's my stance. These are bad faith, disingenuous actors.
The boot being on the other foot, and you'd be picked up Nick Fuentes for using a metaphor. I imagine he'd be screaming about cancel culture and the like. Let's have a look at what Ben Shapiro, another key figure on the right, has been saying of late. Turning up the volume a little bit here.
That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes. They call themselves the Groypers. They are white supremacists. They hate women, Jews, Hindus, many types of Christians, brown people of a wide variety of backgrounds, blacks, America's foreign policy, and America's Constitution.
I mean, it does feel to me like this has been rumbling on for a couple of weeks now. It's been bubbling under the surface for months and months, but it's exploded into public view now. Ben Shapiro there, yourself, other key figures have been publicly saying, as you say, the fox does need to be ridded from the hen house. Do you think it can be, or do you think the sort of genie's out of the bottle now and this is going to cause some longer-term splits on the right?
I think that a lot of damage has been done, Frank. I think that there are a lot of people who have been listening to this un-American, un-Western, anti-Western civilizational tripe, this rubbish for a long time. It's not just Tucker, by the way. I mean, obviously, Candace Owens is another example of someone who has a massive platform who says many of the same utterly unhinged things. So it's going to take a lot of work to try to reverse some of these minds that have been corrupted here. And it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, Harry, is you seek to just sow massive distrust and discord. You seek ultimately to ruin the people's attempts to discern fact from fiction, truth from lies, good from evil, right from wrong, et cetera, to therefore create a market niche whereby you can just say anything you want imaginable, the most shocking and appalling stuff, and therefore it has an audience there. So it's going to take a lot of time to try to turn this around. There's been this drama at the Heritage Foundation this past week there. It seems like the president, Kevin Roberts, who was a personal friend and a good man, seems like he understands now that he made a mistake in coming to Tucker's sweeping defense. He's essentially heavily amended his position publicly, and we will see. But this really is something of a pivotal moment for the conservative movement, which is why Ben Shapiro, I think, devoted an entire episode of his show to explain the full stakes of it.
Yeah, and let's have a look at a clip from Fox News the other night, Erika Kirk, during an interview, calling, as you say, the people like Candace Owens who are putting out bonkers conspiracy theories about the death and murder of her husband that were suggesting that somehow the Egyptian military, the FBI, the deep state were all hiding what actually happened. Well, meanwhile, in a court, a man is on trial. Let's see what Erika Kirk had to say.
He was assassinated. And the difference between this and previous assassinations in this country is there was no social media. There was no AI. I can't tell you how many fake images are out there of all of this. And again, my only request is that just please pray and consider and think about whatever you put online, because it's going to impact his kids in the future. I don't want my kids to go on the internet one day when they're older and see things that, it's just, we're all trying to process this in their own way, and I appreciate that. But just some grace would be nice.
In the politest possible way, I think that is Erika Kirk telling the likes of Candace Owens to shut the F up, right? I mean, for the last few weeks, I mean, as all of these conspiracy theories have been spread, they've been sort of maintaining a dignified silence. Then last week, I think it was Turning Point, Charlie's former colleagues there began to actually directly rebut some of the claims that were being spewed out, however spurious they are. Do you think are we beginning to see a sort of dramatic increase of actually, calling this stuff out, specifically going after people that are spreading it, and actually, is that going to be enough, or do we need to go further?
There's a saying in the American South, Harry. There's this well-known saying in the American South called "bless your heart." And when an old Southern lady says, bless your heart to someone, it is well understood in the cultural context to be the most polite FU in the history of FUs. And that's essentially what Erika Kirk is saying to Candace Owens, right there, is bless your heart, honey. The woman is clearly unwell. She is clearly unwell. I don't claim to be an armchair psychiatrist or psychologist. I'm not going to make some sort of ridiculous diagnosis that I'm not equipped to make there, but she's clearly unwell. She clearly needs some sort of help. I was very happy to see that in the Erika Kirk, Jesse Waters interview. I frankly would like to see even more, not necessarily from Erika, who is a grieving widow. I don't necessarily expect, frankly, anything of her right now other than just to be a mother to their two children. But I would love to see more from Turning Point USA. I would love to see more just in general to try to put the fire out on just some of the insane conspiratorial stuff that we're seeing out there on the internet. It really is up to, I think, leading conservative institutions like Turning Point USA, like the Heritage Foundation, like organizations like this, to say that no, some of this crap that is coming out from some of these flamethrowers, this is not what we represent. This is not who we are. And this is ultimately, frankly, even on the most self-serving terms imaginable, this is not the path towards political and electoral success for the conservative movement, for the American right. For every 19-year-old dweeby Fuentes fanboy incel that someone who is pandering to this crowd thinks they're going to pick up, you're going to lose 3, 4, 5 times as many voters who are just utterly repulsed and repelled and want nothing whatsoever to do with this. You're going to lose blacks, Hispanics, Latinos, Jews, evangelical Christians. Again, the very Christian Zionists that Tucker apparently hates more than anyone in the world. What are you trying to do here? I mean, are you trying to build a political coalition or not? Well, I have an answer, Harry. My answer is actually no. They're not trying to build a political coalition. They're trying to tear it down. That's kind of the whole point, actually.
I mean, we saw a not great night for the Republicans on Tuesday. The president's approval ratings aren't brilliant. We're into the longest ever shutdown in history. Attention's beginning to turn to, well, more than beginning to turn to the midterms, just at a time when actually, the Democrats are in chaos, really. They make gains in places you would expect them to make gains, but there's no sort of sign of a great revival yet. For now, the Republicans continue to hold the House, the Senate, they've stacked the court. This should be a sort of golden age, as President Trump says, for the right in this country. I suppose what I'm really trying to get to is, why now? Why at this moment blow it all up? Unless has the 2028 race already begun, or is this about making money for these people? What's in your mind is why what you call bad faith actors? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing it now?
So I think everyone has their own calculations. I have no doubt that there is some foreign money flowing into some people's coffers. It's difficult, if not impossible, to say exactly which money is flowing into which coffers. I will, though, say that there was an interesting expose in the Washington Examiner newspaper earlier this year, finding this kind of shady husband and wife LLC in Northern Virginia called the Lumen 8 Advisors. And on their FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act registration form, they listed precisely one client, which was the Qatari embassy in Washington, D.C. And then when they listed what services they provided to their client, they listed the Tucker Carlson show. So they were getting paid something close to $200,000 per month by the Qatari embassy, and their only publicly listed service for the embassy was getting them booked on the Tucker Carlson show. So I have no doubt that and that's all public information, by the way.
Yeah,
but
no,
I've no doubt that there's some public money flowing around here. I don't think that's actually the leading thing that's motivating most people, though. Part of it is just a clicks game. They're trying to play the X algorithm, the TikTok algorithm. A friend told me recently, who hosts a popular online show, that if he puts the word Israel in his YouTube podcast title, then he'll get 5 times as many clicks there. I'm not sure if that's true. He was kind of just offering a very crude mathematical estimate. But again, to kind of get back to my main point here, Harry, the number one thing that I genuinely think is really driving some of these folks is they don't like the current right-of-center coalition. They don't like this biblical Christian-Jewish alliance. They hate it. They want to tear apart the Christians from the Jews, from the Jewish state of Israel there, and they see a massive opportunity to drive a wedge through that. But in driving a wedge through that, they're also driving a wedge through the very notion of the United States of America. You know, frankly, Harry, these people I think would do very well to go to Philadelphia and go visit the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, on this nation's most iconic monuments or edifices. And what they will see there is they will see a verse on the outside, not from Aristotle, not from Cicero, no, literally from Leviticus, from the most Hebrew Bible book of the Hebrew Bible, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, thou shalt proclaim liberty throughout the land and unto all the inhabitants thereof. That is this country. This is the country that Abraham Lincoln referred to as a, quote, almost chosen people, clearly evoking that Hebrew Bible, Old Testament language. That is the United States. These folks apparently don't like the United States as it is.
There is a great movement, though, on the right, especially in the younger right, the Gen Z right, to move away from Israel. They've grown up in an age where, you know, that sort of unique relationship between the right of American politics and America itself, as you say, and Israel have a close coalition. That coalition is under massive stress. Is it do you beyond, as you say, the sort of Qatari stuff you mentioned there, do you detect the hand of hostile or outside states trying to drive a wedge here and using these people to basically try and break that relationship between Israel and the United States?
I definitely think that there is some elements of foreign funding and foreign bots here. Again, a lot of this is very difficult to prove. It's kind of just all speculation. I'll give you just one example. There's a little Twitter provocateur by the name of Jackson Hinkle. Guy has millions of followers. I mean, he says the most patently insane stuff imaginable. I mean, he literally tweets about how amazing the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran is. He says, sign me up to fight for Hezbollah so I can go against the Zionists. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he had a girlfriend who was from Moscow there. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of like an obvious kind of clue that maybe there's some Russian money kind of flowing in here.
Some snow on those boots, you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's a very old Russian tactic, right? Going back to the Cold War era, trying to kind of sow the seeds of discord in American politics. And that's literally kind of a 1950s, 1960s Soviet-era playbook here in the United States. So I have no doubt that there are some foreign funds going on here. But I think much more of it, frankly, is organic and real than many conservatives, many pro-Israel folks might care to admit. So there really is a lot of work to do here. It's not going to be easy, but again, it's really not just about the Jews. It's not just about Israel. From my perspective, it really is ultimately about whether or not you are pro-America and pro-Western civilization. I look at someone like a Tucker Carlson, and I just simply cannot conclude that this man is actually on the side of Western civilization. I mean, when you're hosting folks on your show and agreeing with them that Winston freaking Churchill was the lead villain in World War II.
We had a chat about that, don't worry. We went round the houses on that one. I mean, he wasn't backing down there. Josh, stay there. I'm going to bring in Rebeka Zeljko from The Blaze. Good evening, Rebeka. Thank you there for sitting so patiently through a fascinating chat with Josh. I just want to get into politics. You're a younger member of the right in this country. Why is it that suddenly that relationship with Israel, that was such a bedrock for the old GOP, the American right, and Israel, is suddenly being so frayed?
I think, excuse me, I think this really ascended following October 7th, I think, is really when it kind of brought back the relationship with Israel back to everybody's attention. And then I think you saw this conflict just take place for over 2 years now. And so a lot of the base that I think feels strongly about it is the anti-war base. It's the anti-war voter. And a lot of those happen to be young men. As you mentioned, a lot of public sentiment has really shifted in these last couple of years, is really where a lot of the changes have taken place. And it's particularly been among young men. And so that's been a fascinating trend to see for sure.
When you look at Nick Fuentes, though, some of the, I've said his mouth is, it wouldn't looks like he wouldn't say boo to a goose, but mouths off like a sort of drunken SS officer after too many beers. But like, it is remarkable, though, that, this is the sort of thing you associate with the hard left, some of the rhetoric that's coming out of it, but it has infiltrated the right, and it seems to be beyond just trying to be shock jocks and say things that are outrageous. It does genuinely seem to be that the right is moving away from Israel in a younger generation to a massive extent. How has that been allowed to happen, and how is that? Is it too late to sort of get it back? Because this is the next generation of conservative leaders.
I think that a lot of young men are particularly concerned about the influence aspect. At least that's their thesis. It's this relationship with America and Israel. How much is Israel actually affecting foreign policy? That's really the main question. And the problem is that question was kind of unanswered. This wasn't a conversation that had really been going on in mainstream conservative circles. It was really the focus of people like Nick Fuentes, which is why he became so popular so quickly. I think part of the reason, because he was really kind of one of the few people who was talking about it. And so as this war kind of raged on, a lot of people had more questions that they felt were going unanswered. So they turned to the few people who are actually addressing it. And so I actually think that, Tucker's interview with Nick, as unique as it was, I think that it was kind of an attempt to maybe reach this young voter, this young male voter who doesn't feel like they're being acknowledged. I mean, we've seen young men feel as though they're disenfranchised over however many last election cycles for various different reasons. And I think the issue of the day now has become the Israeli-American relationship.
Josh, we saw on Tuesday the young women of New York massively moving towards Zohran Mamdani. We've seen the young men tilt right, but obviously tilt right to perhaps the sort of Nick Fuentes right. Do you worry about the next generation? I mean, it looks like that the younger female voters are going to the hard left, and younger male voters are going to the hard right. What do mainstream MAGA or even mainstream conservatives do to regroup and try and bring that next generation back?
But I think it's kind of just the old-fashioned work, right, of trying to advance the argument and try to win in the battle of ideas. I mean, if there's one thing that I can say that I feel pretty confident of, it is that I believe that ultimately my defense, and folks who agree with me, our defense of Western civilization, Western ideals, American ideals will carry the day over those who are literally offering apologia for Sharia law and arguing that Winston Churchill was the villain in World War II. Those might be faddish and catchy, I think, for folks who don't really spend a whole lot of time opening a history textbook. They're kind of prone to kind of just see like a witty one-liner and say, oh my God, he made a good point. But in the mid to long term, these ideas tend to fade with obscurity as more information gets out there.
And we've got to go to a break shortly, but just a final thought from you both. We're going to discuss the Heritage Foundation in our next segment, but the political damage of this, it is clearly now no longer flame wars online. Josh, to you first, how damaging is this for the mainstream right? How damaging is this row for the future prospects of J.D. Vance, of a Republican nominee at the next election? And has it caused lasting damage, or are we still at a point that this could be stamped out now?
I think it's bad. I think it is deeply problematic. And again, I think that there are real saboteurs, of people that are trying to sabotage this. I mean, is it an accident that the Tucker Fuentes interview was a week before, or actually, no, not a week. It was about a week before the election. I mean, is that an accident? I mean, think about 2024 when Tucker first brought on Daryl Cooper to question who were the good guys in World War II. That was like 2 months before a monumental presidential election. I mean, as someone who is rooting for team civilizational sanity to prevail, are you trying to give the other side ammunition that your side is actually a bunch of literal Nazis? Because one might be forgiven for getting that impression after seeing Nick Fuentes go on a wildly popular right-of-center show 1 week before an election there. So yes, the damage is definitely being done. I think J.D. Vance has been put in a very difficult position by his so-called friend, Tucker Carlson, again, because Nick Fuentes, among others, says horrific things about J.D. Vance and his wife and his children there. So he's going to have to stand for his wife and his literal family, as a man has to do, if nothing else there. So This is a real problem, but no, Harry, I don't think that the hour is too late for it to be corrected, but it's going to take some serious work. The good news is that Donald Trump won 2 presidential elections with all this stuff being totally relegated to the fringe. It was totally a non-issue there. So he's shown that you can win a national election without this garbage being a part of the so-called coalition there, and I'm pretty sure that he'll be able to do it again. May not him literally, but the Republican candidate or the MAGA successor.
Right. Groypers are threatening to send 10,000 people to every J.D. Vance campaign stop and every midterm campaign stop. I'm old enough to remember when Nick Fuentes was saying that he was backing Kamala Harris. So how much impact do you think it will have on the future nominee and the future race in the Republican primary? Or are the Groypers just, chatting off on the internet and actually, most normal members of the public would ignore them? Or do you think J.D. Vance, for example, just to take one key figure on the right, is he going to have to say more than just his tweet calling for an end to infighting?
I think he already is. I mean, he's already kind of trying to reiterate this foreign policy perspective that he really doesn't want to get entangled into another conflict via Israel. That's the sort of thing that you've seen him repeat when he was overseas just recently. And I don't think this is an issue that's going to go away easily, just at least definitely not by ignoring it. I would encourage people to actually engage with people like this who have different, very unpopular views about Israel. And I would actually encourage this dialogue to continue because it's not going to go away just by ignoring it. At least I don't think so.